the flying jeep concept that almost worked. In the brutal arithmetic of World War II, victory was calculated in logistics, in men, in fuel, in ammunition, and in time. How quickly could you move a critical part, a commander, a medical team, a specialized weapon, from point A to point B across a battlefield scarred by craters, mud, and enemy fire? For a few visionary minds, the answer was not on the ground, but in the air. A machine that could drive like a truck, but fly like a plane. A vehicle of pure, audacious utility. This is the story of an idea born of desperation and ingenuity, a concept that promised to rewrite the rules of tactical mobility. This is the story of the flying jeep, the concept that almost worked. Our story begins not on a dusty airstrip, but in the mind of a man facing an impossible logistical nightmare. The year is 1943. The place, the sprawling, secretive research facilities at Wright Field, Ohio. The Allied war machine is reaching its zenith, but with every new offensive, in the jungles of Burma, the mountains of Italy, the hedgerows of Normandy, a recurring deadly problem emerges. Resupply and rescue in forward areas were a deadly gamble. Conventional aircraft needed long, prepared runways, impossible to carve out under fire. Gliders could land in small fields, but were one-way tickets, sitting ducks after delivery. What the commanders on the ground desperately needed was a vehicle that could be delivered by air, could carry a meaningful load, and then could leave under its own power, whether on land or, just maybe, by air. Enter Colonel John B. Stan Stanley of the U.S. Army Air Force's Experimental Engineering Section. A problem solver by nature, Stanley was intrigued by the reports coming from the front. He saw the ubiquitous Willys MB Jeep, the weak horse of the Allies, and he saw the light skeletal frames of American Piper Cub liaison planes. What if you could merge them? What if you could give the Jeep wings? The strategic situation demanded radical thinking. Planning was already underway for the largest amphibious invasion in history, Operation Overland. The airborne divisions, the 82nd and 101st, would be dropped behind enemy lines. Their survival would depend on resupply. Paratroopers needed heavy weapons, jeeps, and anti-tank guns. But what if the gliders carrying them were destroyed on landing? The concept of an air-droppable vehicle that could fly itself out after delivering its cargo was not just innovative, it was potentially war-winning. The U.S. Army Air Forces, in conjunction with the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the predecessor to NASA, gave the green light. Project FX-1 was born. The objective was clear and staggeringly ambitious: design and build a proof of concept, a flying jeep. The contract for this seemingly fantastical machine landed on the drafting tables of two civilian aircraft firms, the Continental Aircraft Company and the better-known, more established Ryan Aeronautical Company. They were given a stringent, almost contradictory set of requirements. The vehicle had to be compact, able to fit into the tight confines of a transport plane or a glider. It had to be robust to withstand the rigors of frontline use, and, most critically, it had to be simple. It couldn't require a seasoned fighter pilot to fly it. A standard Army driver with basic flight training had to operate it. The engineers faced a mountain of challenges. The weight of a standard Jeep's engine and four-wheel drive system was enormous for an aircraft. A conventional airframe would be too fragile for off-road driving. The solution had to be a complete reinvention. At Continental, designers took a more conservative approach, essentially building a small, enclosed aircraft with a Jeep-like body. But at Ryan Aeronautical, a team led by a brilliant, unconventional engineer named T. Claude Ryan, envisioned something truly radical. Their design, designated the Ryan Model 92, or the Flying Jeep, was a creature of pure, audacious utility. Picture it, A narrow, open cockpit, seating two in tandem just like a conventional light plane, but beneath it, instead of a delicate landing gear, were four rugged, beefy tires mounted on a Jeep-style suspension. The body was a minimalist steel frame, stark and utilitarian. At the rear, a pusher prop was driven by a 150 horsepower Continental O300 engine mounted behind the crew. This pusher configuration kept the propeller safe from ground debris and allowed for a shorter, more robust design. But the wings were the masterstroke. They were not permanent. They were a modular kit. Two long, slender wings and a twin-boom tail assembly could be bolted onto the vehicle's central frame in a matter of minutes by a small ground crew. With them attached, it was a plane. With them detached, it was, for all intents and purposes, a slightly odd-looking, lightweight Jeep. They even gave it a four-wheel drive system for ground mobility. By the spring of 1944, as millions of men mobilized for the coming invasion of Europe, the first Ryan Model 92 prototype was rolled out of its hangar in San Diego. Its testing would be a race against the calendar of history. Initial ground tests were promising. The vehicle handled roughly but reliably on asphalt and dirt tracks. Then came the moment of truth. At a remote airstrip, with a Ryan test pilot at the controls, the bolted-on wings were given their first true test. The engine roared, the pusher prop became a blur, and the strange hybrid machine barreled down the runway. It lifted, it climbed, it flew. The data streamed back to Wright Field. The Model 92 could reach a speed of 115 miles per hour. It had a range of over 300 miles. It could carry its two crew and nearly 500 pounds of cargo. On paper, it was a triumph. But war is not fought on paper. The tension now shifted from engineering to application. How would it perform in simulated combat conditions? The Army designated a special test unit. Pilots who were also trained drivers were brought in. The drills began. Scenario: a reconnaissance team is trapped behind enemy lines. A flying Jeep is disassembled, loaded into a C-47 transport plane. The C-47 makes a low-level pass over a farmer's field in Louisiana, simulating a contested drop zone. The components are parachuted down. On the ground, a waiting team of engineers, playing the part of paratroopers, sprints to the crates. Their objective: assemble the vehicle and fly it out. The clock is ticking. The bolts are wrenched tight, the control cables connected. The engine coughs to life. From drop to takeoff, the team managed to get the time down to under 25 minutes. It was a logistical ballet performed under the pressure of a stopwatch that in real combat would be counting down to the arrival of enemy patrols. Meanwhile, in the European theater, D-Day had come and gone. The Allies were bogged down in the nightmarish bocage country of Normandy. Reports filtered back. Jeeps were getting stuck. Roads were clogged. Mobility was death. The need for the flying Jeep felt more acute than ever. A second, improved model was ordered, the Model 92B, with a more powerful engine and refined controls. It seemed the flying Jeep was on the cusp of becoming a reality. But in the harsh light of operational testing, the brilliant concept began to show fatal flaws. The crisis for the flying Jeep was not a single explosive event, but a slow, relentless accumulation of mechanical and tactical realities. First was the issue of the pilot. The Army's dream of a driver who could flip a switch and become a pilot was a fantasy. The test pilots, all highly experienced aviators, reported that the Model 92 was a handful to fly. Its ground vehicle origins made it unstable in turbulent air. The crosswind handling was described as treacherous. The linkage between the steering wheel and the aircraft's rudder was awkward and unintuitive. In the hands of a frightened, tired soldier under fire, it would be a death trap. The vehicle required not just a trained driver, but a fully qualified, specialized pilot. Second was its vulnerability. As a Jeep, it was slower and less armored than a standard Willys. As an aircraft, it was horrifically exposed. It had no armor plating. Its fuel tank was vulnerable to small arms fire.
Flying at 115 miles per hour, low and slow over the battlefield, it would be an easy target for any German infantryman with a rifle, let alone the rapid-fire 20mm and 37mm anti-aircraft guns that littered the front. It was neither a good truck nor a good plane. It was a compromise that excelled at nothing. The third and perhaps most decisive blow came from the changing nature of the war itself. By late 1944, Allied air supremacy over Western Europe was almost total. The skies were flooded with thousands of capable, proven aircraft. The C-47 Skytrain could land on short, improvised strips. The single-engine Piper L-4 Grasshopper, the classic flying jeep in a metaphorical sense, was already doing the liaison and reconnaissance job with stellar success, and it was a pure lightweight aircraft, not a compromised hybrid. The very problem the flying jeep was designed to solve was being solved by other, more efficient